Chairs No Waiting, episode number 704. Yesterday, USA interview of Randy Turner, part 3. Two Chairs No Waiting is brought to you each week by the folks over at Weaver's Department Store. Drop by over at Weaver's and get your 2023 monthly wall calendar. That's right, you can get a wall calendar of the Andy Griffith Show to hang on your wall. Who doesn't want that? Head over to Weaver's and get them while they're still there. They run out a lot. While you're there, you might want to check out the 2023 Mayberry Day by Day Flipbook Calendar by Randy Turner. Wow, what a coincidence. Head over to weaversdepartmentstore.com and check it out. Two Chairs No Waiting is also brought to you by donations from listeners just like you. The executive producer of episode number 704 are the folks who attended the Mayberry Meetup 2022. So thank you all who attended for your support of the podcast. I really do appreciate it. I'm Alan Newsom, the host of Two Chairs No Waiting, and it is great to have you here with us in Mayberry again. Now, this is our part 3 interview with Randy Turner. This was on Yesterday USA. So if you haven't listened to these, go back and listen to the last 2 podcast episodes and catch up with us. You don't have to. You can probably listen to them individually. They'll be fine, but yeah, I want to hear it all because Randy Turner's got a lot of great information to share with us all. So in this one, again, this is from Yesterday USA. It's a radio show. It was recorded back on May 12th, 2020. The host is Walden Hughes. And the first person you're going to hear talking is Patricia. She's going to be asking a question of Randy. And also Dan is in this episode. So you got Walden, Patricia, and Dan along with Randy. Okay, so in this episode, we're going to be hearing about the influence of old time radio on the Andy Griffith Show, the writers on the early TV series, Opie the Birdman. We're going to talk about that. Whether the popularity of the series will continue in years to come. So Randy's going to talk about some of the things he has that are available for you as fans of the Andy Griffith Show that you might enjoy, and talk about some Mayberry festivals and the community that's us, you and me, that are the fans of the Andy Griffith Show. And also he's going to talk about Mayberry Man, which is, I'm not here right now. I'm recording these early, and Randy is doing his parts early so that I can get them all together so they will come to you while I am away filming Mayberry Man, this series. So I want to thank Randy Turner so much for taking the time to do this. I'll thank him again at the end of the podcast. But just thanks, Randy, for doing this for all of us, because we all get to enjoy some Mayberry content when I'm out and I'm busy and I couldn't do stuff, had to do things like go to Mayberry Days and all that. So folks, I'm so thankful to Randy again. So this is picking up where we left off last week. If you'll remember, we were talking about the rural purge. That's when CBS got rid of all these, anything that had a tree in it. That's kind of what they talked about. Any show that had a tree in it, CBS cut and got rid of. So this is where we pick up, and Patricia starts asking the question. So let's let Patricia take it away. So let's head on over there. Talk to you guys at the end.
For me, because all of these shows came on the heels of the Andy Griffith Show, was that a show they tried to emulate in terms of character? And when I say character, I mean the character of the show, not necessarily individual characters. Did they try to borrow that concept and make a success in other areas?
I do think that's part of the reason that the Paul Henning stuff took off. It was again, kind of a fish out of water situation with the Beverly Hillbillies, but they were still country characters. But Andy Griffith was really pretty disdainful of those shows. He said, that's not what we're doing. That's like vaudeville. And I always tell people, you've got the Andy Griffith Show, and do you have to suspend your disbelief? Of course. If you really had a deputy who accidentally fired his gun that many times, you probably wouldn't really keep him. So yeah, you suspend your disbelief to a degree. I mean, all the entertainment requires a willing suspension of disbelief to some point. You look at the Beverly Hillbillies. Paul
Henning had
Go ahead.
Paul Henning had written the first season show of Paul Henning had written the first season episode of Andy Griffith That was
right.
The one that they used the word, "This is the Rock," the first time.
That's right. Yeah, no, he did write an episode of the Andy Griffith Show. But the shows that he created, the example I always use is when you've got a show where Granny sees a kangaroo and thinks it's a giant jackrabbit. That is a very different show. That's a very different show from the Andy Griffith Show. So,
I also have. We have to also consider this too. The great radio comedy writers.
Oh yeah.
Transferred to TV, and I think from 48 to 75, you got to think those comedy writers of radio made the TV golden age work because they knew how to write. And
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. As I said, my family was a Beverly Hillbillies family. I'm just saying it's a very different show from the Andy Griffith Show. I'm not saying there's no humor, but it's much, much broader humor. And I know you guys, I'm sure you're aware of this, but some of your listeners aren't. After the Beverly Hillbillies, and then they had Paul Henning. I may have the order wrong, but I think they did, Petticoat Junction next. Either that or Green Acres.
Yeah.
No, it was Petticoat Junction.
Petticoat Junction in 63 and Green Acres in 65.
Right. And when they did Green Acres, they didn't even make him do a pilot. They just told him to go ahead and create a show. And he was so busy. I think he was one of the producers. He had created Granby's Green Acres on
that was Jay Summers.
Exactly right. And they just, they tweaked it, but it was basically the same concept as the radio show, or, very close to it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that the Granby's Green Acres was a summer replacement radio show in like 1950 something, and it starred Gail Gordon and B. Benaderet.
That's right, and I could be wrong with this. Wasn't who was the farmhand? What's his name?
That Parley Bear. He was him.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to.
Mike Rye, who was Jack Armstrong, was on there, and Louise Erickson, who was Marjorie of the Great Gillis Tree, was on there. So
there's a lot of crossover, and like I said, but Walden's exactly right. Those early days of that, so many of those people, they had already cut their teeth in old time radio.
Yeah,
and it's awesome stuff.
Now, when Don Knotts left the Griffith Show, did he take Everett Greenbaum and Jim Frizzell with him to Universal to write the films?
No, yes, they did in fact write those, but I don't think that's why that's part of the reason the color episodes are different as well. In addition to Don not leaving, they had a different situation with the Griffith Show. They didn't have a writer's room. They just had a lot of writers. Most of them were partners. Every so often, Harvey Bullock would write one by himself, but a lot of times it was a team of people. And a lot of them moved on to other things just to stretch their wings. So they had a lot of new writers. I know I interviewed one of them, and he didn't remember a lot about the episode he wrote, other than they said he had to have a scene in that Floyd's a barber shop, and he said why? He said, well, that's part of the contract we have with Howard McNear, so set one of the scenes in the barber shop. so that's where you have a little bit more uneven writing, but you still have the character. At that point, people had grown to care about and had been watching for the past 5 years already, and it still worked. Though, again, I'm not saying the quality was the same, but it was still a decent show.
Well, Frizzell and Greenbaum went on to write a lot of the early episodes of MASH too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Those guys were great.
I have another question from Ted, and I'm going to be jumping backward here into an episode. He wants to know about the episode he thinks was Opie the Birdman. Is that the one where Opie killed the mama bird and he had to raise the babies?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of times
that was a departure from what typically happened on that show. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, it's not that they would never have something like that, but that one, I mean, there's really very little humor in that episode. It's almost more of a drama in that particular one. There's very few scenes with Barney that you would elicit a laugh. But yeah, in the episode, every season, the first episode of the season was always centered on Opie. So I always say they were Opie centric, but they always. And so that was the opening episode, I think, of season 4. And in the episode, he had a slingshot, and his dad had cautioned him to be careful with it, and he was just playing around with it, and he inadvertently killed a mama bird. And when he comes up and the bird's laying there lifeless, he picks it up and he's crying. He's trying to get the bird, please be okay. And he throws it, and its lifeless body, falls to the ground, and he runs inside crying. And then I remember this very distinctly. I was talking about it in college. I remember seeing this again in college when this happened. So initially they were having dinner, and Opie wasn't eating much. And they made some reference that Andy said he had found a songbird out there, and he thought one of the neighbor's cats had killed it. And then Opie got upset and ran out of the room, and Andy realized what had happened. And he went upstairs and, kind of confronted Opie about it. And Opie said, am I going to get a whip and paw? And Andy walked over and opened the window. They could hear the baby birds up there in the nest chirping. And he said, I want you just to listen to that for a while. So those little birds are chirping for their mama. She's never coming back. Now, keep in mind that Opie's mother is gone. It's heart-wrenching. But Opie decides he's going to step up and take responsibility, and he raises the birds. And at the end, they're too big for a cage, and he's got to let them go. And when you're a kid watching that, it means one thing. But when you're an adult, or if you're a parent and you're watching that, man, it is really moving that he's got to let the little birds go. I'll mention one other thing, that Ron Howard was a great child actor, but, certainly his dad, Rance Howard, had a lot to do with that. And Ron had an actual pet dog named Gulliver, and that dog had gotten hit by a car, and Rance found it and brought it in, and it died. So when it came time to play that scene, he told Ronnie, remember how you felt about Gulliver? So when he's crying, they didn't put any glycerin drops in his eyes. Ron Howard's really crying. And so, method acting at that age. But it's a very powerful episode. It's just a great episode. But yeah, you think of any other, honestly, especially current comedies. If you watch a comedy, close your eyes and count. There'll be a laugh every 10 seconds. There has to be. Andy Griffith Show is not afraid to have an episode like that. It wasn't all laughs. Or the scenes where they're sitting on the front porch and it's just quiet. Just that's a very slow-paced humor, which I love. But, some young people, you need that laugh left and right. The example I use is like The Big Bang Theory. I'm not saying it's a bad show. It's a funny show. But there is a laugh just like clockwork. I'll give you a little piece of trivia about The Big Bang Theory, is that the two, some of you know this, I can tell. The two roommates are Sheldon Cooper and Leonard Hofstadter, named as an homage to Sheldon Leonard, who created the Andy Griffith Show.
If the Andy Griffith Show, will it go beyond our generation? Will this still be viable 2-3 generations down because of the style of humor is slower?
I see people all the time who think that it won't be, that, people will forget. The only thing I can say is it's been on the air nonstop. It's never been off the air. There was I don't remember the man's name, but he's, I think, normally a sportscaster at Fox. And it's been about 5 or 6 years ago now, but he did a study where he looked at Nielsen ratings, but instead of overall ratings, he looked literally by the amount of minutes of the show watched. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how many channels are on cable now, but 500, 600, I don't know. Yeah. Nonstop. They're doing TV 24 hours a day. So if you look at the number of episodes, it's got to, very different shows. It's got to be in the thousands. And that year, the Andy Griffith Show was the 60th most watched show in the country. And it's like 60th out of thousands and it's been off the air since 1968, And I will say in the book that I mentioned, the 60 years that Leroy McNeese wrote something for me, and Bruce Bilson, there's a man named Sean Dietrich who's has a really great podcast called Sean of the South. Great writer. I'm a big fan of his. And he was nice enough to allow me to use some of his writings in there about the Andy Griffith Show. And in one of them, he talks about, he's kind of like a Southern Garrison Keillor, is what I usually say. But he says that whenever he goes and performs any place, at some point in the evening, he'll just start whistling the Andy Griffith Show theme. And he said within 10 seconds, everybody in the theater is whistling it, And I don't know, it's even the name Mayberry's become part of the American lexicon.
Yeah.
I think I think it will be around when I go to these festivals.
Yeah.
It's not just people our age. I see a lot of young people there too. And I like to think it'll last. I mean, who knows? I don't know for sure, but quality tends to last. Mark Twain's still pretty darn popular after. So I tend to think it'll still be around it.
I was just looking last year, and this just shows you where the money's at, everybody. The top 100 shows last year, 75 were football. And basically they're not putting any money really in the drama and comedy. In the drama and comedy. So I think that's why the Andy Griffith Show, the great shows of yet will still be around, because they were produced for quality. And I just don't imagine reality TV is going to be watched 50 years from now, like the Andy Griffith Show.
Walden, let's hope not. I do not understand the appeal. I really do not. Yeah. I've never quite got it.
Yeah,
it's sad because I understand they're cheaper to make, but Walden's right. They don't really produce that many sitcoms or dramas at all anymore. You know, it's easy to do reality TV or sports.
Yeah, that's it.
The reruns are the mainstay of the comedy group.
Absolutely.
And these are reruns of quality shows. I don't know how you feel about 2.5 Men, but there was some really fine acting there when Charlie Sheen was on that show. And, of course, Andy Griffith and some of the Westerns like Gunsmoke. These are all reruns, and these are the quality shows that people can tap into.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the Andy Griffith Show's been around a long time, and people do. And, again, I can't think of any other shows I can say this about, really, as far as comedies. And I enjoy, like the Dick Van Dyke Show. That's a great show. I'm not knocking any of those. I like the Big Bang Theory. I like some modern shows. Or I know they're not on the air anymore, but they left fairly recently. But there are scenes in the Andy Griffith Show that I could almost quote to you in advance, and I know what's going to happen. And Don Knotts, it'll still make me laugh out loud. And old time radio is the same way. Mm-hmm. There are certain things. I'm sorry, if you can't laugh out loud at Jack Benny, some of that stuff, come on. I just don't. I just think it's just great humor and it's timeless.
Well, Patricia,
and I do think Andy Griffith was smart to do that, to keep the show evergreen, without making a lot of references.
And you were talking about how much love is sort of an interesting theme with the Andy Griffith Show, and I have to say that Patricia and I often talk about that. I think that's why Fibber, McGee, and Molly works. You could tell Fibber and Molly loved each other, and that's a good example. The love does win out, and I think people can tell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that is, like I said, that really was the basis of the show. And you read interviews with Ron Howard now, and he speaks glowingly of his time on that show. That Andy was almost like a second father to him, and he still speaks highly of Andy Griffith. And that how much he learned there. And I don't know that you find that on every show. So
there are some catchphrases that have survived, and one in this house, every once in a while you see somebody doing something stupid in traffic, and one of us will say, "Citizens arrest! Citizens arrest!" That, of course, was Gomer Pyle, who had a run-in with Don Knotts, and he learned along the way that citizens could make an arrest. And he got nailed for making a U-turn, and he saw Barney making a U-turn, and that's when he went down the road screaming, "Citizens arrest!" And every once in a while, it's like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And this boob pulls me over. Citizens arrest!
Citizens arrest! Yes.
You don't get to see Gomer being angry too often. You don't get to see Gomer angry too often. When you tell somebody, once you go up an alley and holler fish, that's like
exactly.
What does that mean? So.
We'll come across an Andy Griffith show, and Barbara will say, "Oh, I've seen this one 100 times." And we'll say, "Well, we're going to see it 101." And we sit there and we watch it. It just never wears out. You know what's going to happen. You know the dialogue. You know when Daphne and I can't remember.
Skippy.
Who's Daphne's friend?
Skippy.
Skippy, yes. The two bombshells who show up, and you know what's going to happen, and you know what the dialogue is, and you still have to laugh out loud. There is no help for it.
I have a book. I have a book where I talk about some of this stuff, where some of this stuff came from. But Sheldon Leonard had a personal assistant who's kind of his right hand, a woman, and her name Skippy.
Oh.
Okay.
And her brother, Denver Pyle, who played Briscoe, so Skippy Pyle is her name.
Oh my gosh! My gosh!
Wow.
Now, really,
your book is called Mayberry First.
Yeah, that particular one's called Mayberry First. It's a little bit deceptive. It is based on the first time something would happen on a show. I just kind of have a list of the first time you saw certain things. That's for the list that it's used to use. I use those as springboards to talk about the history of the show. It's just a different approach. If it was just a book of the first time something happened, quite frankly, that's kind of boring. And that's not what it is at all. But yeah, I have 3. That one is based that way. So it's more like a history of the show told in a kind of a novel fashion. The second one I did is called 60 Years of Mayberry. I edited that book and I wrote a couple of the essays, but Dixie Griffith, Andy's daughter, wrote a piece for George Lindsay's son, Bruce Bilson, I mentioned earlier. Various people contributed to that book. And then my most recent book is called The Mayberry Travel Guide, which it literally is a travel guide for Mount Airy, where Andy Griffith grew up. But I wrote it in such a way that I think if you never have any intention of ever going, you'd still enjoy it. A big chunk of the book talks about Andy Griffith would very often give a shout out to folks back home. You know, he would make references to real people or real businesses, and he did that a lot on the show. So yeah,
do you have a website that supports all 3 books, Randy?
I do, Walden. It's pretty easy to remember. It's www, obviously, mayberrybooks.com. So books plural, mayberrybooks.com. And
can people get your calendar on there? Well, can they pick up from
when the calendar is new, they can. There isn't one available right now, but I'll have another one out for next year.
Okay.
So yeah, I have calendars. I have a T-shirt that I sell and a Christmas ornament, but it's primarily the books. But yeah, well, and you can join the ambassadors program there that I talked about to get the certificate, the magazine. And I've got a new thing, really not advertised very much yet. I'm not going to advertise it probably more until next week. But starting next year, I'm going to start doing an event that I'm calling the Mayberry Retreat. And I'm going to do it in Berea, Kentucky at the Boone Tavern Historic Hotel. And I'm going to have Leroy McNeese, who is the dobro player from the Country Boys that I mentioned earlier, is going to be my special guest. And it'll be a very immersive experience, but for people that are really big fans of the show. It's a 3-day, 2-night thing. So so there's information. It's all at mayberrybooks.com.
How many festivals are there really that support the show out there through the year?
Yeah, Walden, of what I would call the main festivals, there's only one left that I'd say but it's the big one. So Mayberry Days is always the third weekend. That's the third full weekend. Is that right? It's the last. I think it's the third full weekend of September. But it's grown. It's almost like Monday through Sunday. But, most of the core stuff is Thursday through Saturday. There used to be a festival called Mayberry in the Midwest that was held in Danville right outside of Indianapolis. COVID gave it a gut punch. But there's still talk of reviving it. And if it doesn't get revived there, I know there's another community actually down toward Louisville that plans to pick it up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
It's in Indiana, right over, but not too far from Louisville. And then, but there are other festivals. There's one they do in Tennessee that's a combination.
Granville, Tennessee?
Yep, combination Andy Griffith and I Love Lucy. In fact, Keith Thibodeau was down there recently. So there are other smaller ones, but what I would call a festival, Mayberry Days is certainly the granddaddy of them. I mean, a lot of the celebrities come there. They have a big parade. They have usually around 30,000 people that attend it, so it's a pretty big festival down there.
So you have time to do anything else besides Mayberry stuff?
Walden, this is not my main job. I just love doing it.
Yeah.
I just do it, when I can, basically.
Your family supports. Your family says, "Oh, there's Randy doing his thing, huh?"
Well, I will share this since you're a podcast. Well, not really podcast, I guess, but as you're a radio host. Yeah. So Alden Newsom has the podcast that was referenced earlier, and when he first asked me to do that, I was just timing how long it would take to say a segment because I didn't want it to be very long. And as I was doing that, I was up in my bedroom. My wife walked in and just stopped in her tracks. And she looked at me. She said, "Please tell me you're not doing the podcast." I said, "No, I'm just going to do a little segment on one occasionally." So.
That's just what Walden's mom told him.
Oh, of course. Well, that's why I prefer to do this all live, because I don't have to worry about posting, editing, all that stuff.
There you go.
Which some people might call that being lazy, but no, I just think doing it live is a lot more easier to do it. So.
Well, honestly, I find most of this stuff that I'm doing, I find it relaxing. I mean, it's not work for me. It's a break from work for me to do this. So I just enjoy doing it. And, I go down rabbit holes like everybody else. I'm not the expert you guys are on old time radio, but I love it. And I just, like a lot. If you're investigating and you go down rabbit holes, you can learn a lot about people. Somebody will appear on the show in a brief scene, and it turns out they had this huge career that I don't think I ever would have known if I hadn't done the research. So
now, the fun part about doing this radio show for all the years we've done it here, and I imagine you've done it. It's the people we meet, and I'm talking about even just the people who listen to us, to people who, of course, the special guests you meet. There has to be some fun stories about the fans of your writings or anything like that. Any heartwarming stories about people who been in touch with you about your books.
I mean, I can share a few, I suppose, but the one of the ones that means the most to me is I have a good friend who helped Betty Lynn out a lot in the nursing home down there. He was a volunteer and became really dear friends. And I had Betty's cell phone number, but I would never, ever have called it. I just had it. So if she ever called me, I would know it was her calling.
Right.
But I know when she had the vaccine, the first COVID vaccine shot, kind of laid her out that day. And my friend had reached out to her and asked if she was feeling okay. And she said, "Well, not really. I've been in bed all day, but I've been reading Randy's new book." And it's like that kind of stuff to me, that alone makes it worth it for me.
Yeah.
The first time I met George Lindsay Jr., his dad was Goober on the show. I was at that Mayberry in the Midwest Festival, and I was talking to somebody, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around. Of course, he had on the Goober hat. He was dressed like his dad. And he said, "Are you Randy Turner?" And I said, "Yeah." And he started bowing to me, because he liked the podcast kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And, I'm sure you guys have had this kind of thing too, but I was at Mayberry Days at some point, a number of years ago now. And somebody turned around, "Are you Randy Turner?" They just recognized my voice from the podcast, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's just been fun. I just enjoy doing it. I've got, I've become, Dixie Griffith has been really supportive of me, and things like that. That means a lot to me. So those are I don't want to lose money doing it, obviously, but I'm not trying to get rich. I'm trying to, obviously I want to spread the Mayberry spirit, just try to share the good news, as it were. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Well, Randy, except for one question, one more question, if you can tolerate it. There's always one more question. In all of the research that you have done and the years that you have put into Mayberry, what has surprised you the most along the way?
Well, the part of the reason I'm having trouble answering that is I can't recall when I didn't know as much about the show. I know I learned things early on that I would, at the time, would have been like, "Whoa, I didn't know that." But it's hard for me to remember it now because it's happened so often, and now I do know it. So I don't have that same sense of surprise. But I guess the fact that there's a very strong community of fans, and I guess I knew it. I kind of knew it existed. You know what I mean? I knew they did these festivals. The first time I ever went to one, they did one here in Westchester, where I live. This would have been like maybe 1996, maybe. And George Lindsay was there. Got to meet him. He was the first one of those, people I met. Alan Newsom was there. I don't remember meeting him, but I know he was there, But at some point, these people, they almost become like your family, I mean, like when I go to these events, it's almost like a family reunion.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you had the same time with OTI, the same kind of thing. And the Cherry Blossom Festival, it was my first time to go, but it was very clear that a lot of those people, they were there year after year, and they know one another.
Yeah.
And it's just a wonderful, there's a singer out there named Paul Thorne who has a song about family reunions, and the hook is something like, I don't even actually like half the folks I love. So, with this, these people are all, and when you go to these things too, I'm sure you guys have the same experiences, but politics doesn't play a part in it.
No.
Other than a general Judeo-Christian, be good to one another, doesn't play a part in it. It's just about people that love that show. And you can go there, and I'm quite sure that certain people I probably would not have much in common with away from it. But when you're there, everybody's there because they love the same thing. And it's really fun. And it's just a neat community. I always tell people, they always say, well, I'll do that. I'll get around to that eventually. I'm like, don't do that. Life's too short.
Yeah.
Go do it, because you can sit around and say, I'll do that next year, and then you're gone. It's just better to go do it. I've never regretted going to one yet. I'll put it that way.
I think the Mayberry Man movie kind of summarizes maybe the Mayberry following in the next generation, where the son of Hoke, I'm missing the names here, but basically the son of the star from the Andy Griffith Show, gets pulled over, and he doesn't get it till he goes to one of these festivals, and then he's kind of dumbfounded by, why is this man dressing up like Barney Fife, or why is Alan playing Floyd? And then after being around these people, he gets how Mayberry fans are a family, or how old time radio fans are a family, and then that's when he begins to appreciate it. That's basically the gist of the Mayberry Man movie that Alan appeared in.
Well, they give him
and you've seen it.
It's Stark and Court. It's Hoke Howell's sons. And Stark directed it, and Corey helped produce it, as did Greg Shell, Ronnie Shell's son. Ronnie was Duke Slater on Gomer Pyle. He was also a producer. But I know a ton of people that are in that as far as that goes. But it does. I mean, they filmed it during COVID. If I had any regret about it, is you see these quote unquote crowd scenes like the parade, and there are not that many people. When if you really go to one of these events, there's there, but that was part of their hands were tied a little bit, in order to film it. They did a good job with what they could have done with it in that sense. But you're right.
That's right.
What it's about. I think a lot of people had the misconception they were trying to make the Andy Griffith Show, and that's not what it's about at all. It's just about the community, really. And, I'm sure old time radio is the exact same way. But that's probably been the biggest surprise for me. I sometimes say I'm kind of glad I didn't know it early on, because I would like to have gone. I look back at it, and I know they did events here in Ohio that Don Knotts an hour from me, an hour and a half. I didn't know it was happening, but I also had kids that were a certain age. Maybe it's just as well, because I couldn't really, in good conscience, tell my wife, watch the girls. We'll be back in 5 days. I'm going down to this festival. So maybe it's better I didn't know about it at the time. But now I try to do as much of it as I can, at least. So
sure, that's right. That's great.
Randy, I think we have overstayed our welcome. We've
that's
just
okay.
kept you.
No, I'm glad I got to actually meet Walden, however briefly, at the festival, and I very much appreciate you asking me to do this. This was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, man.
It's a lot of fun for
you
us.
can squeeze us down the road again. We'd love to have you back. So,
you let me know, and I'd be happy to do it.
That's great.
Oh, that's great. All right, Ernest T.
It's Randy T. So
Randy T.
I don't have a gold tooth, but other than that, I'm all right. So.
Oh, my gosh. It has been a joy. Thank you, Randy, for spending so much time with us, answering so many questions, and sharing so much. It is a great show, and you more than do it justice.
Well, thank all of you for having me. I really, I appreciate it very much.
You bet.
Okay. Well, you go and be safe.
All right. Take care.
You bet.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow, what a great job they did, and Randy did in this interview. And I want to just thank all the folks that were involved in that, with Walden and Patricia and Dan, just providing all that amazing information. Go and just search the internet and find Yesterday USA. It's a radio program. It's an online, it's a internet radio station, and you can go and listen to old time radio there. And they have these interviews like this. I've done a couple with them over the last several years, and they do it's a lot of fun, and you get to just talk and visit and have a great time, as you heard Randy throughout these two episodes. So wow, what a great job. Again, I want to thank Randy Turner for taking time to put these together for us and have these episodes available for all of us to enjoy. And now they're going to be online here at twocairsnowaiting.com for you to go and listen to anytime you'd like. So again, thanks to Randy. Folks, I would love to hear from you. I would love to. So give me a call at 888-684-8415. And let me know what you've been thinking about these interviews, shows with Randy. I hope you enjoyed them, and definitely want to hear from you. I know Randy would too. So show him some love and tell us about how great it is, and how even so much better it is than when I talk the whole time. Because it is to me, because I get to listen. I enjoyed it. So it won't hurt my feelings at all. So feel free to tell him. So, folks, again, thank you for being here. Give me a call at 888-684-8415. Email me at floyd@imayberry.com, or head over to twocairsnowaiting.com and let us know how you think. Folks, have a great Mayberry week, and we'll see you next time right here.